everyone. Hello. Hello, everyone. Let's start taking our seats so that we can begin the next panel. At this point, I'd like to invite our panelists for the next session. Okay, let's make our way back in here. I'm Don Chen with the Ford Foundation. I have a terrific panel of funders up here, and I would actually like them to introduce themselves as we allow people to settle in here. So to my left.
How does this work?
Just start talking.
Hello, yeah. I'm Anders Brännström, then I'm chairman of the Volvo Research and Educational Foundations based in Gothenburg, and that's it. We'll come back to that later.
I'm Shin-pei Tsay. I'm the Director of Research and Development for TransitCenter. It's based in Newark, works nationally. We just got started. It's excited to be here.
My name is Michael Meyers. I'm a Managing Director at the Rockefeller Foundation, and a major part of my responsibilities is to coordinate our work in the United States, a big part of which is transportation.
Terrific. And over the course of the next couple of days, you'll hear from people in different sectors. We've heard a little bit from people in the public sector. We'll hear a little bit from academics, from people in the private sector. And one thing we wanted to make sure we could do is to have people from philanthropy talk about transportation as a priority within our sector. And I think many of you know that the foundation sector has been involved in transportation policymaking projects, various types of programs for many years, starting, well, I'm sure it goes way back, back in the day when Volvo and Ford were still, car companies that had foundations embedded within their corporations. But in the last couple of decades, in the United States at least, transportation funders have been involved in supporting civil society organizations, researchers, and many others to do things like develop policy ideas like the ICE-T Act in 1991, which had substantial leadership from the Surdna Foundation way back when, all the way to today when we have a lot of different initiatives within the nonprofit sector that are focused on various aspects of transportation policymaking and decision-making. So it's a very robust sector, and wanted to have a chance to share some views from our fellow funders of this event. I'd like to start the panel by just asking you all what your priorities are, a little bit about how you got to those priorities, how you developed them, and whether it reflects a change in your strategy over time.
For our part, I can say that we have focused on future urban transport for the last 15 years, approximately, and we have a subtitle saying Coping with Complexity, which has a specific purpose. And all of you know Sweden is a pretty small country. Most of our effort is outside of Sweden, some extent also nowadays in Sweden. But the subtitle, Coping with the Complexity, actually was recognition of the fact that technology per se, vehicles, as Volvo is a vehicle company, heavy vehicle, buses, trucks, cars, originally not any longer owning the car brand. But still, that's a completely different aspect. We don't contribute to technology on that level at all. We're looking more at the socioeconomic perspectives and the decision-making complexities around urban transport issues. And when we started 15 years ago focusing on urban transport, the urbanization wasn't really highest on the agenda yet. We could only see the trends were evident that very soon more than 50% of the global population would live in urban areas, which is now the case. And what we also did, and coming back to the change later, is that we had a very open view. We wanted to build capacity to do research around issues for urban areas related to transport sector. So we had very open calls the first years. We had very open seminars, and from those we decided more or less how should we make calls, and then we had a very open selection of the calls. We have then, but we're a very small foundation. We don't have a lot of money. So we have to always think about how can we move in areas where not the mainstream is. So some of the things that we started more or less 15 years ago have become, we think, closer to mainstream. In those 15 years, we have also said that we had to be all over the place. So we are people from financing, supporting people in Beijing, Delhi, Australia, Cape Town, Santiago de Chile, the US, several centers. We have in Europe, London. The idea has been to make sure that capacity to do research and knowledge building is becoming or is really local. We have to help build local capacity, not capacity in Sweden or in industrialized world, and then try to spread the gospel. And so just to finish off then, so what we have said now, if you look back to the latest initiatives we have taken, it has been really focused on starting areas where we think it's very interdisciplinary, and very few other funders are looking for opportunities like financing urban access and then you have come into the issue, what is access and financing urban access? How do you work on such a subject? That was just an example.
Well, we're also very small, so we totally understand that, but we also benefit from having a bit of a blank slate in that we just formed in this new identity as a foundation last year, so we are doing a lot of program development right now. And I think knowing that the industry is really so entrenched, the institutions have been operating the way they have been for so long, we really wanted to take a fresh look at what works. And that's really how we've arrived at our new program areas. You know, we think this is a really dynamic time to be working in transportation. There are a lot of disruptors from unexpected places, both in leadership, in practitioners, in civic engagement, and we really want to enable more of that to happen. We also are working on making sure that all that activity connects up to the policymaking framework as much as the policymaking framework connects down and incentivizes those people who can take initiative and move forward. So a few of the things that we're looking at doing is, how do we ask the right questions and get information and knowledge in the hands of the people at the right moment? I think the timing is absolutely key in terms of the research that we want to fund. So we did a transit attitude survey recently. We just launched a big report on regional governance because transit governance is so fragmented, as we had heard this morning from all the panelists. It's very difficult right now to move forward, and so where do we start looking for openings and making reform in that way? Another thing we're doing is looking at, given that it has been so difficult to make change, where have rider experiences actually been able to be improved? And that actually is through the private sector, through things, shared mobility, through Department of Transportation, folks making biking and walking easier in spite of the lack of federal funding. And I think those are the things that we're hoping to encourage more of, more on the demand side, less on the supply side as a strategy for now.
It reminds me of what John Orcutt said about the places that are succeeding in this space are doing it for themselves.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Don, and to the Ford Foundation for hosting us today, and Volvo Research and Education Fund for helping to make this possible. This is a great gathering, and looking forward to learning a lot in the course of it. At the Rockefeller Foundation, we have two goals, no matter what the area is, no matter what the topic is, whether we're working in health, or working on ecosystems or urban issues or trying to increase people's livelihoods, we always have two goals in mind and try to satisfy both of them at one time if we can in a single initiative. One goal is building resilience, helping people, helping communities, helping countries, helping regions build up resilience so that when bad things happen, they bounce back. That's goal number one. A second goal is equity, opportunity, increasing people's livelihoods so that as opportunities are created through the work, people have an opportunity to capture the good. So we help through resilience building, we help people deal with the bad, but also through opportunity building, we help people capture the good. So that's how we view the transportation work as well. We see transportation as a means toward greater resilience on the part of people and populations, but also connecting people with opportunity. We look in this work, as we do in other aspects of our work, since our funding is limited, for points of leverage. So what are some things that we can do within a larger system of like transportation that can leverage bigger change? So are there innovations that we can further along? Are there new collaborations that can make a difference? Things that with a small investment can produce vast change and a lot of good. So we focus on that a lot, particularly in the transportation area where the price tags of things tend to have multiple zeros behind them, and our foundation alone isn't going to solve this. One final thought, Don, is that we find in environments such as transportation that have a large segment of policy related to it. A lot of it is about changing policy, that those are terribly unpredictable environments. So we go into this knowing that the assumptions we started out with may not be valid when we get halfway through them. So we have to prepare for that at the very beginning. So one example is that we invested very heavily to help stand up an organization, Transportation for America, that a number of us are involved in. But that was in recognition that the policy environment is unpredictable. Policy change often takes a long time. So build up their capacity so that they can carry on that fight for the longer term.
Great, thank you, Michael. As you can read from this giant banner to my left, the Ford Foundation is all about advancing social justice, supporting visionaries at the front lines of social change, and also focusing on poverty reduction. And so all of our transportation work is really undertaken with that set of lenses. The work that we do is very much like what some of my fellow panelists have described, ensuring that transportation is a means to an end. It connects people to opportunity, also seeks to improve communities, whether it's stabilizing different places that are either under-resourced or distressed, or creating more value through the integration of land use, development, housing, and transportation together to create quality places, particularly low-income communities that need more investment, more jobs, and those types of opportunities. We work in the United States and 10 Global South regions, and it's been a great experience for us to really learn about the connections between different places, the common problems, challenges, and opportunities faced, whether it's, for example, trying to advance BRT in different countries, or look at transit-oriented development, or non-motorized transport, and how that can improve access for people who generally go without, people with very modest means, and transportation therefore takes up a huge proportion of their household income. So these are the priorities that the Ford Foundation has focused on, and one of the important takeaways, I think, is that there are a variety of transportation funders, and we all form this ecosystem and find ways to work together. And I think we've made some reference to the challenges and opportunities that we all face, and I'd like to ask next question about that, but in particular within the framework of what foundations can do. You know, foundations are unique animals in the world. We have, in most cases, a lot of latitude. You know, we're able to provide grants. In some cases, we can do impact investing, innovative investments. We can also do convenings like this and a variety of other activities. And I'm curious if each of you can talk a little bit about the challenges that you face, as well as the things that you see are the brightest prospects in the work that you do, and also from a foundation lens.
Of course, being, as was said, a very small fund, relatively speaking, to you and Rockefeller, it's of course real challenge to make a real impact. Our thought process has been so that initially, at least, we started to say that we will build capacity in local places by being not in the industrialized world or close to home, but further out. We would help to build capacity in other places that hopefully then could sip through to education and out in the society. We all know that it's a long, long, long way, and the effect may never come. Sometimes it comes. But it's still important to build the knowledge basis, and so the knowledge is established and hopefully can grow in the local area. We also believe that actually the teams doesn't have to be that big, but at least they have to have a good and reasonable funding to continue their work. The best way to make impact is, of course, to be part of experiments. But transportation or societal experiments are hugely expensive, and it's not realistic to think that we can be part of that. What we think, though we hope can contribute to also the impact is actually being part of arranging workshops like this, where people can interconnect and learn from each other. And we have also started more into funding let's say inter-regional projects that are using experience from one area and try to use that in other areas. Still not implementation-wise, but knowledge-wise, to get the local context into more holistic knowledge. But to get into impact and measure impact is a tremendous challenge with very limited resources.
Yeah, definitely measuring impact. I mean, what is impact? That is incredibly challenging. I think there's so much to be done in this space. I feel like part of it is prioritizing what, and that I think leads to, one of the best roles foundations can play, which is to connect. There is such a robust ecosystem, not just among foundations, but among all of the change agents, even within the agencies that we seek to change. So it's not just civic or private change agents, they're public service change agents. And I think foundations, because of their independence, play a great role in being able to convene people together. In doing so, the way that foundations, I think, can be instrumental is influencing the conversation in a way that either patches in other disciplines, shows some of the other maybe social impacts, things that may not have a market for them. So, quality of life issues, access, equity issues often are thought of by private sector actors as not having a market. And I think foundations really have a great role in being able to bring those to life. I think we're working in a space where, as we had heard a lot about earlier this morning, that the practices, the institutions are incredibly rigid, outdated, and that I think is one of the largest challenges. Many of us may not have ever worked in one of those places. I was literally told I'm not a transit guy, so I can't, change transit. I think that's, some of these fundamentals, but it's the same kind of, I think, fight that maybe others in the field face. And so I think if we band together, maybe there's some advances we can make.
My boss, my president at the Rockefeller Foundation, Judith Roden, likes to say, or sometimes says, I don't know if she likes saying it, but she says it, that if the Rockefeller Foundation succeeds at everything it does, that her board should fire her. And the point is that of all the kinds of organizations on this planet that can take risks, it should be foundations, because we're not beholden to shareholders. We don't have to report quarterly earnings. We're not facing re-election before the electorate next Tuesday or anything like that. We should be able to take smart risks, not just any risk, but smart risks. And I think about this in the context of the Rockefeller Foundation's investment in transportation over the past few years. And but the way we work is we have time-bound initiatives where our board will say, okay, you've got an idea on something, go pursue it for X number of years, and then we do that and reassess before taking the next step. So we're in that kind of reassessment stage, having done a bunch of grant making over the last few years. But in looking at that work, we started out in 2007, 2008, thinking there was a big federal play here in the United States, that the stars were aligning for big change in America, and we should take advantage of that. And so we put our bets on that. We discovered, as all of us know, that gridlock hit Washington, and a lot of that was not possible, so we had to make adjustments along the way to focus more and more on building institutions for the longer term, looking at state and local innovations that might be able to lay the foundation for bigger change later on. So risk-taking, I think, is something that we as foundations have an obligation to do. But with risk-taking also comes the need to have flexible strategies that can be adjusted with the changes and the learnings that we inevitably gather along the road as we do our work.
I think these are all very astute points. One thing I'd like to underscore is, in addition to risk-taking, which is absolutely critical, foundations can stick with major issues over a long period of time. I'm thinking about Secretary Fox's desire to lead a 30-year national planning process for US DOT, and he's really taking the long view. Because we know that a lot of the important social change that needs to take place, whether it's, for example, reforming systems of policies and practice within the transportation sector, will take many years and a lot of dedicated attention. And so some foundations, of course, are known to be fickle. They change their minds about what they're going to fund from a couple year to a couple years. But a lot of foundations are able to stick with a particular program area for the long time, which is a nice thing for a lot of those who are in the trenches working on these issues to be able to have. For the Ford Foundation, in terms of challenges and opportunities and our perspective, I think that one thing that I'm particularly excited about is in this field is a couple of things. Number one, contrary to where we began, decades ago, depending on how long your careers have been working on urbanization, on transportation, the issues that we address now are pretty hot. They're gaining a lot of attention. We're seeing mayors gain traction, for example, as spokespeople for the economic engines of their countries. We're also seeing a lot more attention on innovation in cities. And what I see as a priority for us is to try to channel some of that innovation towards conversations about social inclusion, about equity, and really make that a robust or more robust area of inquiry and activity. Right now we have a lot of great innovation in a number of other dimensions of urbanization, such as sustainability and other things, and so that is great. Would love to see more on the social innovation front, or social inclusion front, rather. The other one that I see as a big conundrum, it's both a challenge and opportunity, is the challenge that we heard about this morning, which is how to generate more resources for transportation. On the one hand, there's a tremendous amount of money, trillions and trillions of dollars being invested in infrastructure around the world, and yet there's a chronic shortfall for resources in a lot of different places. So really putting our heads together to look at issues like finance and other forms of innovative revenue generation and value capture is going to be a really critical thing. And I think foundations can play a unique role in that because of the way we're positioned, even though our money pales in comparison to public sector money or even private sector money. The funds that we're able to provide tend to be very flexible. We tend to be able to apply our risk capital to thorny challenges, and that's one of the things that we are eager to jump into. I also committed a terrible mistake for a moderator by not bringing a watch with me, and so I want someone to prompt me when we're, okay, we got 5 minutes left. Okay, so I'm going to ask the last question. I just got to punish myself for this. So, last question. Here we are. Volvo Research and Education Foundations has convened a conference around the future of transportation on a regular basis. We also have a great network with Rockefeller and all of its grantees and partners, and the TransitCenter has been playing that role. I'm curious what you are expecting to see from this conference. What are you expecting and hoping for from this peer network that Columbia and our other partners have gathered and brought into this conversation? What are you hoping to get out of this?
I would like to say that yesterday there was the PhD network had a lot of meetings. I think that's an important part also of these gatherings, that young people in the research phase can meet peers and discuss and get views and get ideas, perhaps new ideas to make joint projects downstream. And we have said earlier that we, from our point of view, we help also finance PhD students if they want to move to other places and work for a period of time in order to build network at a younger age. But we also, of course, think it's important that the more senior friends of ours and local friends here in the US will meet together and develop ideas to new projects based on the findings, the knowledge, the perspective they have brought with them, and the new ideas they see when they get here. And then it's also, so it's a platform kind of for networking. That's one of the keystones why we have those workshops that periodically have networking abilities in different places of the world, because it's very interesting to have a similar activity in Nairobi as we have had some years back, or in Beijing. They're the same issues, more or less, but they're completely different contextually. And therefore, one solution doesn't fit all. There has to be a very much local considerations in order to move this subject forward. So the local character adds a lot to the networking perspectives, I think.
I agree with that completely, and I think one of the great things about these meetings is to hear about the priorities from people who are in the field. We always have a partial picture when we are working from a distance, which is necessarily the work of a foundation in some ways. So it's wonderful to be able to fill in those gaps, understand how they relate to one another, understand local context, transferability in some cases. So you're basically making our picture richer.
I agree with everything that's been said. So we're all here for the same things. And maybe what I can add to it is it would be interesting also to get kind of new perspectives, kind of reframing some of the challenges. Because a lot of us have been at the transportation game for a long time. So maybe there are different ways of thinking about it. There's a story from NASA, the U.S. Space Agency, that makes this point very clearly for me. And it's many, many years ago when they were first putting astronauts into space. Their biggest challenge was how to prevent the astronauts from burning up on re-entry. And so they tried to devise these metal alloys that could withstand great heat, and that didn't work. They tried this and they tried that, and every attempt at re-entry, preventing the capsule from burning up, failed. So what are we going to do? We're going to be sending live human beings into space. We need to figure this out. So finally, when they realized that they shouldn't be focused so much on keeping the capsule from burning, simply focus on keeping the astronaut alive all the way to Earth, then they had the breakthrough innovations about the tiles that are put on the outside, and the tiles burn on entry. They just don't burn all the way through to the astronaut. And once they focused their minds, they reframed the problem differently, they were able to come up with some really creative solutions. So the same kind of thing for transportation. Would be interesting to have conversations such as that here. It would be very challenging for all of us.
Sounds like Secretary Fox needs to appoint you head of NHTSA. Well, yesterday I attended the PhD session at Columbia as well, and in that session I met an anthropologist, a historian from Harvard GSD, a environmental policy person, a civil engineer, people from different disciplines, from different countries with very different perspectives. And one of the exciting things about working in the transportation field is that it's connected to everything, and fairly obvious to everyone here. But it's connected in a way that really hits the ground and really matters to people on a day-to-day basis. And one of the things that I'm very focused on is trying to get the other colleagues and grantees and partners that we work with on issues like governance and human rights and what a lot of things that the Ford Foundation is well known for, to really understand the importance of transportation. And what it really boils down to, if you think about the bus fare riots in Brazil last year, or the public service protests that are happening all over South Africa, people are getting fed up with their systems not working, not serving them well, not costing, or costing too much for them to be able to afford. And what this says to me, and it's really resonated with a lot of colleagues around the world, is that the fulfillment of issues like transportation, of housing, of fairness in urban decision making, these are things that really are an important aspect to fulfilling the ideal of social justice. And so we've made that connection very strongly, and so we have, at least within our orbits that we occupy, a broader set of constituencies and partners that are interested in the set of issues. And I hope we can do more of that as we go forward. I think we're basically out of time now, Professor Sklar. And so I will ask my panelists to exit stage left as our next panelists come up, and we're going to take our microphones with us.